South Korea is taking an experimental approach to a tough-to-define problem by offering the country's solitary young citizens a regular living allowance in the hope it will encourage their reintegration into society. So-called reclusive youths, who the government says rarely leave their homes, could receive a monthly handout of 650,000 won, that is $490, on top of additional support for personal and professional development. According to a legislative amendment announced in April by the cabinet of President Yoon Suk-yeol. South Korea, one of the world's most advanced economies, is as wealthy as it's ever been, with longevity and living standards on the rise. Seoul's decision to help a small but vulnerable subset of the population indicates a maturing welfare system, some subject matter experts say. The Ministry of Gender Equality and Family has extended schooling support, counseling and career training for those aged 9 to 24 by drawing a direct line between youths living in relative isolation and existing concerns about the country's at-risk adolescents, including statistics of self-harm among teenagers and young adults. In the 19 to 39 age group, an estimated 338,000 people, or 3.1%, experience social isolation, said an accompanying study by the government-funded Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs. Among those categorized as recluses in the 19 to 29 age bracket, 40% said seclusion began in their adolescence, according to a paper by the Korea Youth Counseling and Welfare Institute, also publicly funded. In one case study cited in the ministry's report, an unnamed 17-year-old's social withdrawal was attributed to domestic violence and depression. The individual slept most days and struggled to leave the house or make eye contact with others. In another, a young student's malaise was said to have been exacerbated by attempts to force them back into the classroom. Reclusive youths can have slower physical growth due to irregular living and unbalanced nutrition, and are likely to face mental difficulties such as depression due to loss of social roles and delayed adaptation. Asia's fourth-largest economy also faces other unfavorable demographic trends, including a steadily declining population down to 51.6 million people in 2022 after peaking at 51.8 million 2 years earlier, and a fertility rate of 0.8 that saw only 249,000 newborns last year, the lowest in contemporary records since 1970. Yoon has called the country's birth rate a crucial national agenda. But, as in neighboring Japan, the population challenge persists despite policies and public expenditure exceeding $200 billion in 2 decades. Meanwhile, those over the age of 65 accounted for 17.5% of the population last year, according to government-run Statistics Korea. It projects the aged population to reach 20.6% by the middle of the decade and 46.4% by 2070, creating a sizable social security burden on the shrinking working-age population between 15 to 64.
In Japan, acute social withdrawal, known as hikikomori, is said to affect nearly 1.5 million people, according to the country's Children and Families Agency, which last November identified the phenomenon in 2% of people aged 15 to 64. Officials in Tokyo define hikikomori, which refers both to the people and the status, as living in isolation for at least 6 months. Despite studies going back decades, however, its exact parameters are hard to pin down. Long-running research describes it as either a psychiatric or cultural syndrome. The South Korean government says reclusive youths live in a confined space, disconnected from the outside for more than a certain period of time. These individuals exhibit noticeable difficulty in living a normal life due to various factors including school bullying, academic stress, domestic violence, or a general absence of care. A snapshot provided in January by the local government in Seoul said 129,000, or 4.5%, of the capital's young adults aged 19 to 39 were living in some form of isolation, mainly from unemployment and social or psychological difficulties. Nearly a third said they had been living a solitary life for more than 5 years, and 11.5% said their reclusiveness exceeded a decade. More than half expressed a desire to end their seclusion, according to the city's survey of 5,513 young adults, which was extrapolated to suggest 610,000 people across the country could be living in similar circumstances. Academics have studied social isolation in the elderly for years, but the phenomenon affected the broader population during the COVID-19 pandemic amid shelter-in-place orders and social distancing, according to Statistics Korea, which found 20% of citizens experienced loneliness last year. Seoul's answers to the problem, if successful, could provide useful insights for other capitals in the region. As with the issue of low fertility, it all lumps into this idea of South Korea's national interest. You want to make sure that there is a healthy, balanced relationship across generations for a functioning society in the longer term. I think the government realizes that with these demographic changes, there is a younger segment of society that may need additional support. Do let us know your views in the comment section.